Adrian N. Breitfelder, City Clerk, you are hereby directed to call a special session of the City Council to be held on Monday, March 4th, 2024 at 5:30 p.m. in the historic Federal Building for the purpose of conducting a work session on the Sanitary Sewer Asset Management Plan.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome to a special session of the Dubuque City Council for March 4th, 2024. As a reminder to viewers and listeners, due to the nature of tonight's meeting topic, public input is not accepted. However, you may contact the City Council directly from the city's webpage at www.cityofdubuque.org/council-contacts. Attendance for the session is as follows. Mayor Kavanaugh.
Here.
Council members Farber.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Resnick.
Here.
Roussel.
Here.
Sprank.
Here.
Wethel.
Here.
City Manager Van Milligan.
Here.
And City Attorney Brumwell.
Here.
Thank you. Our work session topic is the Sanitary Sewer Asset Management Plan, update on consulting engineering services. I will turn it over to Civil Engineer Maxwell O'Brien.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Max O'Brien with the Engineering Department. Been working as the project manager for the Sanitary Sewer Utility Asset Management Program. Want to thank you for your time. We wanted to have this meeting, just kind of give you a quick update on the status of our program and what we've been doing since we presented to you last year. I'm sorry. This isn't in presentation mode. Well, whatever. Is everybody able to see this?
We can see it there. Eric, could you flip it onto the screens for the City Council too, please? There we go. We're ready to roll.
All right. Sorry about that.
Oh, thank you.
So the purpose of this meeting is just, again, just to give a general update on the status of the program and where we're at and what we've been doing. In May of 2023, we were authorized to negotiate a contract with HDR Engineering and their subconsultant, Origin Design, and that contract was executed in June of 2023. Nate Campman from HDR is the project manager from their side. He's here today just to kind of provide some additional information during the Q&A portion. So in the 6 to 8 months since we've executed the contract, staff has worked with HDR to develop some initial task orders, and we just kind of wanted to get into some of the early findings, the current status, and the next steps. So this slide just kind of generally provides a quick agenda for what we've got today for this presentation. So kind of starting with the end in mind, every task order of our program is kind of geared towards proceeding on a risk-based analysis. The risk kind of being a composite score between the likelihood of failure and the consequence of failure for every sewer asset that we've evaluated in the system. The graph here is just kind of a graphical representation of what how those two scores kind of work together to develop a risk, and we want to identify the critical risk items that are in the top right. But these are just some of the just general goals of our program that we kind of looked at before. So developing repeatable and dynamic processes that allow us to kind of quickly evaluate the condition and level of service of an asset. We wanted to kind of develop that risk analysis and just get a composite score that's a little bit more quantifiable as we work through the program. We wanted to identify just various utility staff and resource needs that we could identify and work through as we move forward. And lastly, we wanted to optimize our existing operations and maintenance procedures. So in previous presentations, we had shared this general diagram. This is from EPA guidance document, that very long string of numbers. So with what we've done so far, we're still pretty early. we're still heavy in the early data collection and analysis phases, so like that study 1 and 2 area, but we're starting to get dip our toes into identifying the critical assets and developing the logic and decision matrices to kind of identify what those are and define those so that we can continue doing that as we collect data. So due to the kind of complexity and magnitude of our program, we've taken a task order by task order approach so that we can adapt the program and just do the tasks that best fit the needs of the system or fit the needs of our utility as we collect data. So I guess that said, what we're showing here on the screen are just some of the initial task orders that we identified pretty early on that we anticipated as we go. The currently active task orders are shown in bold with some of the future ones shown in the gray text. So these future task orders, they're just going to help us continue along that process of the EPA's guidance documents, the studies 3, 4, and 5. So, sorry, pages sticking together. So to quickly summarize where we're at with things, task order number 1 had a very heavy focus on data collection and the assessment, but we've been keeping an eye on identifying what those critical assets could be, such as like large diameter pipes or things that if we've identified, hey, this pipe's failing, so we've been able to identify it, bump it up on the list, and start working towards addressing some of those things up front. So this task order also included several workshops between HDR and city staff to identify, to discuss system needs, current practices, identify some goals for the programs, and we'll kind of touch on that a little later. But in general, we've compiled a huge amount of data, and we're getting close to the end of the analysis for this first task order, with our final results and memorandums kind of coming up within the next month. We're in the stages, and we're just kind of validating what the initial results are currently. So task order 2 had a very heavy focus on evaluating the existing sanitary sewers capacity, or current capacity, but again, identifying which ones, what could be critical assets, like based on area served, and if this pipe conveys 70% of the flow in the system, we want to keep a closer eye on that and make sure it's modeled appropriately. So looking ahead, this task order also includes another workshop between city staff with the planning services department, to kind of discuss the future growth scenarios that could potentially happen in the city and what we would do. The goal of that is to kind of define what that process looks like in updating land use mapping and identifying some scenarios that we could plug into this hydraulic model and just see what can we accommodate now and what we would need to do to accommodate what we would want. So that workshop will help us define help us refine the scope for our next anticipated task order, or one of our upcoming ones. We're probably thinking it'll be task order number 3. So we're in the thick of this analysis, and we anticipate the deliverable for task order 2 within the next couple months. So under these 2 task orders, this is just kind of a general list of some of the key updates that we've been doing on the bigger ticket items with the program. Again, with the staff workshops, we've been optimizing our sewer shed limits. We've been updating our flow monitoring plan. We've been doing a deeper dive in our condition assessment and our CCTV data collection program. And lastly, again, with the hydraulic model and the capacity analysis. So with the staff workshops, we held several workshops, and it included staff from engineering, WRC, and the public works departments. I listed the dates and the number of attendees on the slides here. But for each workshop, we discussed, again, the system needs, system priorities, and goals for the program. So within each workshop, staff were all provided sticky notes, and we were requested to write down their opinions on those items. And we just put them up on the board, took a lunch break, came back, and during the lunch break, we worked with HDR to kind of categorize and just come up with the common themes of all those sticky notes. And we grouped them and then just had an open discussion with everybody. So the pictures here, it's probably difficult to read, but that was just kind of after we grouped them up. And then in that open discussion, the picture in the top right, you could kind of see the green stickers. So at the end of each workshop, staff each had 3 stickers, and they were asked to vote on which ones they felt were the most important for that workshop or in the context of that board. So across the board, all the departments indicated that the city had a very strong bench of experienced staff that work very well together across the departments. So that was nice to hear. So following the workshops, HDR helped, they pulled together and summarized the data, and they summarized the data and kind of prioritized all the feedback from the various workshops to kind of come up with this list. The bars here, just number of votes, left the numbers out just because got a little lengthy. But this was just kind of like those common themes and just which ones were identified as the most important by staff. So we had a follow-up debriefing meeting with staff on November 14th, to kind of summarize the results of the previous 2 workshops and kind of discuss the goals and priorities and how everything was worked together as a utility as a whole. So again, same as the previous workshops, everybody was provided stickers and they voted on them and just tacked them onto the board, and that's where this graph came from. So the general consensus was that staff showed a heavy emphasis on wanting to update our data management and data visualization practices so that we could use those for more efficient data-driven decisions. So one of the larger updates that we've been doing with the program is we've been redefining our sewer shed limits. So the image on the left is depicting what our sewer shed limits are currently within our GIS database. These were originally identified largely on topography, because water flows downhill, so it made sense and it helped us kind of make the system more manageable. The areas where there was a little bit more broken up, those were related to our consent decree program, so that there was a closer look taken to those, and they were broken up into subsheds. So what we've done is we've kind of taken the similar approach as those consent decree sewer sheds, but applied it across the city, where we identified it and just broke them up into all the various subsheds, which is kind of the example in that center photo. But ultimately, we broke it down to, we wanted to tied to that criticality of the sewer system, we wanted to identify these as more sewer sheds based on connectivity of the sewer system and which assets are connected. So these 4 sewer sheds, each of them are served by one major lift station facility that pumps directly to the treatment plant. So that's why there's the only 4 sewer sheds. It's because they're all going to the one point. But we wanted to focus on taking the tiered approach and identifying those on the connectivity and with a focus on the area served. By doing this, we could kind of more easily identify the critical assets, because things that are a little closer to the treatment facility, there's less length of pipe, less total number of assets to serve that specific sewer shed. So there's lots of factors in it, but it helped us kind of keep an eye towards that criticality analysis. So another benefit of this tiered redelineation is that we can optimize our operations and maintenance and inspection protocols and just work on our schedule, again, based on that area served and the criticality that we've identified. So kind of along those lines, by taking this area-based approach or area-served approach, we could kind of dig into that the current condition and the maintenance practices, and we can use the data to start identifying patterns of recurring sewer calls or incidents and things like that. So the maps on the left are what we had previously showed in previous presentations. That one in the top left is that expected useful life map just based on the age and material of the pipes within the system. Below that was just at the time the number of sewer calls we've had throughout the city. So part of the analysis that we're doing is kind of taking all that data, putting it together, and just again looking at the area within each of those sewer sub basins. So we kind of pulled that together, and the map on the right is just identifying areas where just larger concentrations of the older pipe, more calls, and just to kind of help us prioritize it. So that's all this is, just more in terms of we should get in there and do more inspections more often, just make sure everything is okay. Because in fairness, we have sewer within the system that's well over 100 years old, but structurally it's in perfect condition, where we've had other sewers that we've installed within the last 10 years, but completely failed. So it's variable, and it's just a matter of looking at what's that likelihood versus that likelihood of failure in terms of, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's failed, it's just want to keep a closer look on it. So again, the age isn't the only factor. So we looked at the number of service calls and incidents, but by kind of taking a closer look at this and comparing the different results from those different analyses, we could kind of identify different patterns where, okay, it's not an old pipe, but maybe it's flat or it's reverse slope and it's causing backups. We should go in there and take a look at it. Or maybe it's an area that has a little bit of excessive inflow and infiltration that we should go in there and see where that's coming from and if we could eliminate it from the system. So taking this approach, it allows us to kind of take a more effective look at scheduling our preventative maintenance activities. We know this will help us hone in on where we should focus and send the crews to go do their inspections or their cleaning and things like that. So next we took a harder look at our flow monitoring studies. Historically, a lot of our studies have been focused on the consent decree program, which was largely focused in very specific sewer sheds, mostly located in or around the downtown areas. So we've taken that data. There were previous studies that very focused capacity studies in other parts of the city. So we've taken the data from those, kind of compiled all those and identified the gaps in our flow data. So on the map, the areas shown in blue are where as part of this study, we've been including new flow meters in the system and collecting data over the last year or so, or about a year. The areas in the purple were where we had previous capacity studies, previous flow metering data that we were able to incorporate into our new program. And then just the areas that are generally around downtown, those are where we have a pretty substantial history of consent decrees, flow monitoring data. So we were able to, by making use of all this data, we've been able to have some cost savings and been more focused on the analysis of the data rather than the collection of the data, because we've been making use of the data that we already have. So I guess that said, we are also taking a more systematic approach to prioritizing where we want to collect more data, again, based on that sewer shed criticality that we've been redefining and just coming up with a plan for, okay, next year we're going to go to these areas and pick up data here. We'll continually update our model based on that new data. So then, as part of this is with this flow monitoring program, it's helping us identify areas where when there's wet weather or things like that, we can identify the specific subbasins where we're seeing that excessive I&I and just kind of put it on the list. And those are the areas we go hone in through through the separate I&I program. So with the hydraulic model, we're taking a system-wide approach and modeling any sewer that's within our system that's bigger than 10 inches, just to identify all the critical paths within the system. So we're leveraging a newer hydraulic modeling software. but it's more efficient with the Aquanuity software. It works directly within our databases, so there's no import-export, so it's more efficient with our data practices. So as we update our GIS, the model will update and account for that automatically, and we can just rerun the model and get new results based on the data as we collect it. So we are taking that approach. We are still wrapping up the model development and analysis. We have some preliminary results that we've been kind of taking a look at and trying to validate between the flow meters and working with our operations staff who've been in the system and kind of know what's everything going on. But some of the areas we've identified just as where we have current capacity restrictions, so we're taking a closer look at. One would be the South Fork of the Catfish Creek Interceptor, and there's a couple capacity pinch points in the existing sewer out on the island. So we're taking a closer look at those areas moving forward. So the model has already shown results and helped us kind of take a closer look at things. So lastly, this is just kind of, it's a very complicated flow chart here. But this flow chart was kind of where we started out with the program, and just kind of these were the anticipated program processes that as we collect data, this is kind of where we want to get. So we've identified the red boxes kind of indicate where we are today with where we're at with the steps. So I mean, we still have we have a ways to go. But as we're working on this project or program, we're refining this map and just kind of putting in some more specifics and details to each of these steps. And we're trying to develop a more clear roadmap for the program that will kind of more appropriately depict how our goals and key performance indicators and how we're going to track goal completion. Just we're working on refining that. So based on all the data that we've collected so far and just what we've heard from staff and what we've seen in the data, we've worked with HDR to develop these 4 preliminary draft program goals. And again, we're working on developing that roadmap to kind of identify how we can track our metrics against these goals and develop ways to get us there. We're still kind of working on that, so in a future update, I'll provide that, and once we have that more clear than the spaghetti up here, we'll show you again. But I guess to summarize, we're adaptively managing the program just to best meet the needs of the city, and we want to promote the proactive improvements in operations rather than just the reactive maintenance and yeah. So I know I kind of sped through that and I apologize, but that's where we're at today. I feel pretty good about I feel good about the program. We're making a lot of progress and have a lot of data, but we do have a bit of ways to go. But it's been about a year since I gave y'all an update, so figured let you know where we're at. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much. It's informative. Questions, discussion?
Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Barber, yeah.
So thank you very much for this roadmap and for the best practices that you guys have identified. That's a major undertaking, and I think it gives us really a guide, as you had said, and a framework to move forward as we look at the infrastructure and our needs. And based on the infrastructure and our needs, is this going to be part of the budget discussion in terms of what we're going to be talking about in the next couple of weeks? How does this relate to what's going to be presented in terms of sewer and infrastructure?
I will say our goal is that this program will definitely facilitate that process in the future, and where we want to get. I pulled up the EPA guidance, but that last step is that long-term funding plan. So the goal is, as we develop this program, we'll essentially have a score for each sewer asset or project and things like that, that this program will, just based on the decision logic that we develop, it'll kick out that score, and that'll help us guide like which projects we recommend and which project, and it'll factor in all these different things. So it's related. This next one that we have next month, we've been using some of the mentality towards it, but the program is not quite there yet.
So basically, the future analytics will probably help with the funding
Correct.
going forward. So great. I think I look forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Resnick.
Thank you. So, it looks like a big improvement over just guessing and waiting for breaks. So thank you for that. I noticed the number 4 in your life cycle, the guide life cycle, is the cost is coming up. You're going to try and figure out, that's, important. What are these things that we're going to predict? And so I keep reading about this trenchless system repair or sewer repair where there's a pipelining and it can last up to 50 years if it's done right. And you're going to be, if the structure of the pipe is solid, then you can use that. And if it isn't, then of course you have to replace it. So that's all going to be, we use a lot of that in pipe lining.
Gus, you could probably help me out with this one, but I know historically, as part of the consent decree program, with our to eliminate the I&I in our system, we have done lining in historically. We would like to move towards doing it more often. It's not always feasible, but that's part of what we'll do as part this study is kind of help us identify which ones it is feasible to do that, which ones it's not, and it's one of the many factors that kind of go into that we're putting as part of this study. Hopefully that answers your question, Gus, if you can help me out.
Yeah, Gus Sohoy, city engineer. We use pipelining quite often. Last year, we did a project where we lined the pipe probably for a third of the cost, and it saves the disruption of the yards, and it's done, in a matter of a few days. You just have to get prepared for it. But there is lines historically that we've done over the years, and we'll have a lining project, maybe 2 or 3 lining projects every year. So we do use lining quite a bit.
So do new sewer installs include pipe lining since it increases the life, or you really can't tell until something, it's not an automatic that we're going to line things, even though it sounds like, or what you read, it will vastly improve the life of that sewer line.
That's right. So if the pipe is adequately sized and there's no structural problems, then it's easy to line it. But if you have to upgrade the sewer, then it's impossible to line it. So we just have to replace the pipes that need upsizing.
Great. So, it's always one of the things that you're considering, right?
Absolutely.
So my question, you were going to say you're investigating these pipes and you're going to check these out. Does that investigation involve cameras? And are you going to do some chemical testing with those, what's in those? Because, we have some pipes that were ravaged by some of the chemicals that were put down there. And so is that included?
So we have a closed circuit television program or CCTV program that we've been working on concurrently. It's very related and it supports this program, but it's a separate program that we have where we use that to hire contractors to go out through the system and inspect pipelines, putting the cameras in there. Our public works crews have a CCTV truck and they do very extensive inspections, but with 300 plus miles with 300 miles of sewer, they can't be everywhere all at once. We have that program to kind of supplement the data that they've been collecting. In terms of the composition of the flows, the WRC crew or staff, they've got separate programs with water quality monitoring. We have water samplers that we can put out in the system and collect the data, and they do the testing in the lab at the plant. That's, I believe that's part of the industrial pretreatment program that we're revamping. But I guess to summarize is, yes, we do those. They're separate programs from this, but they're all definitely very interconnected and support each other.
All right, and thank you. And finally, you mentioned that some of the 100-year-old pipes are in pretty good shape. So is the 100-year-old mix for cement better than what we're using now? And is there a quality difference that you can buy up front? Or is it all supposed to be, it's cement of a certain quality and it's all about the same?
I'm going to give you my least favorite answer and say it depends. It's very situational on how it was installed. Sometimes you just get a bad batch with the pipes. It's very situational. It could be soil condition. It could be what the flow coming through the pipe is. It could be the slope. They could have forgot to put bedding on that portion of the pipe. It's very situational.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Ms. Rousseau.
Thank you. What a really complicated system, and I'm glad that we have experts that are taking care of these things for us. There was something that kind of caught my eye. It was on slide 10, and it was the list of the program priorities that came out of the workshops. And I noticed that safety was down towards the bottom, but I'm sure that safety is really not down towards the bottom in your work. And I wondered if perhaps you could tell me how safety really does come in to the work that you do and your planning processes.
Yeah. So I guess I apologize. These lists from the staff workshops, they were, I guess the ranking, we were more focused on like which one was the most important. So everything on this list is important and staff feels very strongly about it. We were just very focused on which one had the most votes, essentially, in terms of like what was the opinion on which one was the most important. But the safety factor is very, very critical in terms of like having, when the guys go out and do maintenance or have to do a spot repair, we have the appropriate equipment. So if we have to dig, is there a trench box? Is there the appropriate number of, like, nobody's going out there alone, so in case something happens, you have like the buddy system essentially. I mean, there's
So it's a much higher priority than it appears just on this
correct.
slide here.
Yeah, everything on this list is a priority. It's just priority A, B, C.
Thanks.
Yep.
Ms. Bethel.
I loved the idea that we have a strong bench of experienced staff, and I think that speaks to what we have prioritized as a council to ensure we continue to have a strong bench of staff and what we discussed in the last year with goal setting. So thanks for bringing that out. I appreciate it, and it helps us to get to this place where we're doing a more proactive systemic approach. And obviously, I feel like you're all motivated to even push the needle on it further. One thing I did want to just make sure we don't miss is that the majority of the dark red is in a poverty census tract. I think I would be correct in looking at that. A lot of it's in Ward 4, Ward 1. And I think when we speak of a pillar of equity in our city, it's something we need to remember when we look at these. So thank you for really making that clear for me, that as representing Ward 4, I consider it, a really important priority for our city. So thank you. I have no questions, but I really appreciate the information. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Well, I have a couple for you, Max. So first of all, thank you for this. This is, I think this is yet another example of really going above and beyond on how we're using data to make long-term, very important decisions. I mean, that's what I'm seeing here, and I think that's what you're describing to us, is that when we talk about asset mapping, we're talking about the next 50 years of what's going to happen in the sewer shed. So I think it's really important that we have these moments to be able to talk about how data is being used in this way. So thank you very much for putting all this work into it, and for all the staff for doing that. Your flow chart, your fun flow chart at the very end there. I have a question about it, which I know it's complicated, but I actually appreciate it. I mean, if you zoom in on there, you can kind of see that you're thinking very carefully about the steps that we need going forward. At the end, though, with budget on the brain, I'm seeing things, I'm kind of playing off of Ms. Farber's question here. At the top arrows, you've got CIP development way up there. It made me think, this flow chart kind of has a timeline to it as well, right? I mean, as you get through some of these steps on this chart, I mean, do you have a sense in your mind of how long this is going to take, this process that you're in right now, the asset mapping process? I mean, what's the timeline for that?
Nate, you want to help me out with this one? I'd say, and again, the CIP is currently, we have it listed as a plan, but this is definitely a program, and it's an ongoing program.
Sure.
This upfront bit, I mean, we're year two.
So Nate Campman, HDR Engineering. I'm out of the Cedar Rapids office. Thanks for having us tonight. Yeah, I mean, the schedule for this, the initial piece we're working on right now, we are working towards a list of projects that will be capacity related. So that's just looking at hydraulic capacity in the system. Moving forward, we will be getting more into the risk-based decision-making, which is looking at the condition assessment data, looking at the types of material that's in the system, looking at degradation curves, looking at historic calls for maintenance and those types of things, and taking all of that and building decision logic that we can run that data through to basically come up with a prioritized list of intervention strategies. So if you're going to do a lining, or if you're going to do a replacement, or that type of thing. I would say that piece we're probably not going to be to until at least a year from now, just based on the amount of data that we'll have to go through. But the good thing is, once you get that framework set up, it's a repeatable process. So you're going to continue, Max and the staff will continue to gather data on condition, and they already have a lot of great data. And so it'll just refine itself over time as that data continues to get better. Does that answer your question?
It does, and it's actually really helpful information, because I think sometimes when those of us who are not spending every day doing this, right? I think sometimes it's easy to look at something like this and be like, well, you know, stuff's broken, just go fix it. Or there's not enough sewer out there, go put it there. That involves a lot of steps, and it involves a lot of decision-making, as you pointed out. So what we're building right now is the ability to decide those things more effectively and efficiently. Is that a good way of describing that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's really what it is. And I think it's important as we have this public discussion that people recognize that this stuff is, not only is it's expensive and it's complicated because it involves digging up a lot of things and doing things and using different methods to dig up and all those types of things, but it also takes time. One of my biggest frustrations about being in a role like this one is the time that things take to see changes happen, right? But it takes a lot of time to get to a point where we can make these decisions effectively with the right data, so we don't just screw it up and have something that fails in 5 or 10 years. I mean, we need to make sure that we do it right. So I think it's a really important piece of this whole discussion is that as we make these decisions, we're doing it, I think, in a really smart way. So I appreciate living in a city that is looking at things this carefully to be able to make decisions in this way, even if it is going to take us a little bit more time to get to the point where we feel like we can make those decisions with all the data that we have to work with.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Max first, and then, yeah, because I know you had a point.
I was going to say, and again, it's as part of this program, when kind of like that end goal, we are a bit of ways from that, but that doesn't mean that we aren't utilizing kind of the mentality and the thought process currently. So we're slowly adapting it.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. As you learn more, you're adapting to the things that you're newly learning, basically. Yeah, just as we should. Yeah, Ms. Farber.
Just an operational question for HDR. Is it your software that the city is using for the understanding, as you said, of the hydraulic capacity, the condition assessment, the calls for maintenance, and then prioritization? Is that a software package or an AI package that you already have that will be blended into the process here on the far right?
Yes. So there's several softwares that we're using right now for the hydraulic modeling. None of it's like HDR proprietary. It's available.
Gotcha.
It's out there on the market. So for the hydraulic modeling, we're using a program called Aquanuity. It's a GIS-based hydraulic modeling software. It's fairly new, but it uses the same hydraulic calculation engine, so that's reputable. But the really neat thing about it is it runs inside of Esri's ArcGIS Pro. So as you update things in GIS, which I've noticed your engineering department does fabulously, we can also have the model see that and run with those new updates. So, and then when I was talking about the risk-based decision logic, that's a software package called Info Asset Planner. And that's what we currently use. There's other platforms that are out there, but we have had a lot of success other places using that.
Okay. Well, great. Well, that's great, because that's really a platform that we can build on, and that will expedite the final conclusion that hopefully we're working for the automated database. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Well, this is fascinating and very helpful, so thank you very much for bringing this to us and having a work session. We really appreciate it. Seeing that there are no further questions, and we will stand adjourned till our regular meeting. Thank you.